Today primarily we will be talking about how anthropology had uh, taken a birth, and of course the whole lot of evolution of anthropology we will be doing in anthropological theory, but then some kind of a basic idea we must have before we go into various topics of the discipline. So our focus today will be primarily on genesis of anthropology, and secondly we will look at definition of a tribe. We would also introduce tribal anthropology. I hope things will go fine and you would enjoy the show. Settle down first so that I need not have to stop. So how was your day yesterday? Good? Jiju is there? Where is? Ah, yeah. I was recalling your name yesterday. Now, we'll forget this for some time. And we also have a small movie to watch today. I am only showing you a part of the documentary. The rest of it you'll watch back home. And I picked up a tribe for today's discussion in the documentary, which lived for a long time in an isolation, absolute isolation in the Amazonian forests. And that I'm sure would interest you to continue watching a movie of that kind, and I'm sure you would keep asking me for many such movies in the future. So we would begin with this. We are trying to look at this topic, the birth of anthropology and how it all had begun. Sir, we are looking at a time somewhere in the later half of 1800s. That was a time when we see that Europeans started spreading their political authority across the globe. Meaning they were trying to look at several continents, several countries that were unfathomed till then, and they were trying to establish their political hegemony there, which we otherwise called imperialism. So that was a time when several European powers, whether it could be the Britons, the Belgians, or maybe the Germans, the French, the Spanish, whoever, or maybe towards the end of the story, the Americans, they were trying to look for newer areas so that they get to the resources, they get to the regions, they get to the people in the sense that maybe in search of the slaves or people who could work for them. Now, when I say this, it looks very uncomfortable to talk about because the foundations of anthropology were laid on imperialism. And when these people belonging to those European powers, now we call them in a loose way the Western powers. One, the whole lot of Europe, the other is the American. This group we call them Western. When these Western people, they started roaming the world, and the people who had represented those Western countries could be the rulers, whether they could be administrators, they could be simple travelers, they could be missionaries, or maybe, not to forget them, the traders. When all these kinds of people, when they were moving the world, when they were trying to explore the newer territories, something that had struck them was the kind of very distinct culture that they were witnessing. The cultures were not so very simply different, but they actually were considering those cultures to be very bizarre, to be very surprising, shockingly different. See, different is a little smaller word, but they could see very surprising, very shockingly different cultures. when this had happened, they got into the kind of comparison. So when we talk about anthropology to begin with, we say that this was based on comparison. In yesterday's class also, I had used this word. Go to your list of questions, question number 3. For those of you who have joined us today, we are actually trying to maintain a list of questions to be studied over a period of time, to be written down over a period of time during the course. The question number 3, comparative method in anthropology. Comparative method in anthropology. Generally, whenever we compare, there is a possibility, I said this earlier also, there is a possibility to grade ourselves in a hierarchy. Somebody that is superior, somebody that is inferior. It is here that I would want to introduce one a very cynical kind of a term called Homo hierarchicus. Homo hierarchicus, I am not using the name of the author who had used this term or written an article with that book, but then I am using this word to bring home a point that humans basically love to live in a hierarchy. And because of that nature of a love towards a hierarchical structure, we are otherwise called Homo hierarchicus. Homo sapiens are largely hierarchy-loving people as long as you are there at the top. Throughout our journey, we are going to see how the tussle had been going on between the people who are there in the bottom and between the people with the people who are there at the top. You always are against the hierarchy as long as you are in the lower rungs of the society. The moment you move up, you would forget the hierarchy. That is the reason why we are called Homo hierarchicus. We would be talking about this fellow over a period of time. Now, when a discipline was getting established, it was based on that kind of a hierarchical feeling, and the large lot of Europeans, they started nurturing a feeling of ethnocentrism. I had used this word also in yesterday's class. Ethnocentrism is thinking high of your own culture. But look at your syllabus, chapter 2, paper 1. Sir, I'll have to say this. The first week of your classes, I said to you that we would be trying to lay a foundation of terminology, a familiarity. So we seem to be slithering here and there in the syllabus. You don't worry about it. Sometimes, sometimes order emerges out of disorder. So even if it is in a very unsystematic way, when we are moving from place to place, finally the whole thing would come up to a shape. Now in chapter 2, paper 1, there are 2 terms given. Chapter 2, paper 1, 2 terms given. One is called ethnocentrism, the other is cultural relativism. Sir, these are 2 very important topics in your syllabus. Anthropology is considered to be a discipline that challenges ethnocentrism and propagates cultural relativism. Now, this discussion of ethnocentrism and cultural relativism was majorly brought into the discipline by one man. We were talking about him in yesterday's class in that dancing pose out there, Franz Boas. See, you know one anthropologist. No? So, for those who did not meet him yesterday, we will be giving you good list of names of thinkers, mind-boggling list of names out there. My only intention is that I should give you a list so that you wouldn't struggle while naming your child. You will have good number of newer titles. and you will have all the varieties out there, all the nationalities. So because I already have a friend of mine who had named his child Boaz, kind of an Indian Boaz he is. Kanakachalam Boaz, K Boaz. I would want to give a small idea about these two words, ethnocentrism and cultural relativism. Sir, all of us by default are ethnocentric to some extent or the other. And most of us are in a way racist in spirit. How much ever we say, no, I'm a thorough racist, we have to accept actually. No? We are all racist to some extent or the other. We are not here talking about what is a race, etc. But then, whatever characteristics we are possessing, we consider them to be superior compared to the others. However heinous the kind of cultural crimes that we indulge in, we portray them as if they are the superior ones. That's why you should not forget the statement, no? Our beliefs are beliefs, others' beliefs are superstitions. Yeah? Always our beliefs are superior ones. The others' beliefs we try to look down upon. For example, we have this major characteristic of the contemporary mainstream Hinduism, that is idolatry. Idolatry is something that became inseparable from the faith. And certain other faiths that do not subscribe to idolatry, they describe the Hindus or Hinduism as pagan worshippers, or the ones that are considered to be pre-civilizational people. But then we have to understand, we will see as we go into the discipline, that irrespective of the faith that you are in, whether it is a monotheistic faith or a polytheistic faith such as Hinduism, all of us indulge in idolatry. All the religions in the contemporary world indulge in some kind of an idolatry or the other. In other words, idolatry is the worship of the material thing. Or you see the image of the god in a material. It need not be a statue of the god for that matter, or a goddess. So suppose you have a cross. You have a cross. Now cross had taken as a representation of the god there. It is the possession of the god rather. So how many times, your friend must have done this, late night, 12 o'clock, when you had to come out of your library, go to your room, nobody is there on the road, and then you are holding your cross and kind of thinking that the cross would actually repel the kind of any evil forces that might come, all the exorcist kind of things. Though you are from a monotheistic faith and also from a non-idolatry faith, at the end of the day, you are actually trying to see your God in the cross there. I hope you're following. So material became the storehouse of the faith. But then we see that all these people who are trying to rule over the rest of the world, they came up with the superior-inferior kind of a feel. Challenging this at one point of time, Boaz came up with this idea of cultural relativism. In fact, this particular term I introduced to the students somewhere after 10th or 15th class, but then I thought I would, in your case, because I am doing tribal anthropology for you, we would, in the beginning itself, talk about it. See, I'll have to say this. Sometimes when we come across certain terms, the term might look familiar to us because we must have used it in English, we must have come across this in English, and we might attach the same meaning that any common English usage gives to us. See, what happens here is, Every discipline has got its own special vocabulary. Even if the same term is there in various disciplines, according to the discipline, the meaning of the term might differ. Are you there? Similarly, within the same discipline also, a term might mean different things in different contexts. Now, when it comes to cultural relativism, a term that looks to be a common English usage, what might be the meaning of it, if at all you are trying to guess over that? Okay, not with the intent of comparison, a culture in relation to the other, meaning what kind of relation they are having with each other? Something like that? Anybody else? Achha, here he is trying to understand what kind of a relation they are having, but he says cultural relativism confirms that there is a relation between two cultures. Aur bataiye. Understanding different cultures from that subject's point of view. Aur bataiye. So cultural relativism is a way, is a mechanism through which we try to categorize cultures. Or one more. Mama? I say out whatever you have said so far. He says cultural relativism is a way of understanding how cultures are related to one another. He says there is a confirmation. The concept says that they are related to one another. He says understanding any culture from their perspective and certain other things out there. Same thing might happen whenever you see n number of terms, n number of questions in the exam. Many times it might so occur that a term is coming up in the exam which you did not prepare. And you try to use your own genius and write your answer. This is here that I am trying to caution you. Attempt only if you really heard about it in the discipline, not outside. Let me tell you this, though we would be coming back again and again to the same concept. What cultural relativism says is, no culture is inferior or superior. No culture is inferior or superior. And cultures shall not be compared to arrange them in a hierarchy. Cultures shall not be compared to arrange them in a hierarchy. You may compare for some constructive reason, but you shall not compare for the sake of arranging in a hierarchy. Thirdly, it propagates that one culture shall not judge the other cultures. Are you able to follow what I am saying? No? If at all you didn't follow, you raise your hand. I don't mind saying again and again. Generally, teachers say things again and again, even if you don't like. If you don't follow, you tell me. 3 things I said. No culture is superior, no culture is inferior to the other. Do not compare for the sake of arranging in a hierarchy. And thirdly, it says that you shall not be judgmental towards the other culture. Achha, in your experience in your life, did you come to a kind of a judgment of that kind? You came across some cultural practice which is very much different from your own cultural practice. You thought that how weird it is. Madam says, maybe in the northern part of the country, cousin marriages are not really encouraged or accepted rather, but in the south it is the order of the day. Hanji sir. Sometimes some tribes don't wear clothes, okay, but it's summer friendly. Okay. और बताएं polygamous marriage, how scintillating. I'll tell you a secret. Should I? Even if you say no, I will say anyways. Humans look for more. Humans generally look for more. Just because there is a rule of monogamy, you try to be under control. Given an opportunity, minus responsibility, each individual would want to have more than one spouses, irrespective of gender. I said so much. That is the animal instinct in human. That's what culture does. That's what the societal rules do. They try to tame the personality of the human so that you don't move around hither and thither and you do all kinds of things. You'll have to be controlled. That's very, very important. Whenever your mind strolls away, you try to say, no, 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 come back. Just count on one fine day, you just count. How many times you had to say this? No. How many times? That's where we can understand how many times we must have stopped ourselves from sinning. See? We will continue on that. So that is the basic meaning of cultural relativism, and we would be exploring more on that. Sir, when these people, when they were trying to move around the world, at that time anthropology was still not there. They were actually the earliest people who were studying culture. Even the discipline of anthropology was not there. Forget about anthropologists. That time when people who were trying to write about the bizarre cultures, they were called culturologists. And the discipline was called culturology. And culturology was being taught as a small component within psychology discipline in Europe. So you can say that we were born out of psychology, and in some universities, or culturology was placed in sociology. Later, when culturology started getting more and more kind of information added up to it, then people started to calling it anthropology, and then they said, no, it is getting its own sphere now, it is shaping up in a good way, so let us separate it. And we will be talking about another person in some other class who was instrumental in separating anthropology from sociology and claiming a separate status for the discipline. We will talk about him some other day. Now, the earliest people, the earliest people who were trying to study the cultures apart from the traders were the Christian missionaries. You watch movies? You watch movies? Huh? Which language? Language no bar? There is one very old time movie which I insist that you watch in the beginning of your course itself, titled The Candle in the Dark. The Candle in the Dark. As one of the students was saying in yesterday's class that we heard that you take a lot of talk about a lot of movies in the class. It's actually a surprise that I have moved into the third class and I didn't talk about a movie in the class. But this one I'll have to talk about. I'll give you the timeline of the movie. The Candle in the Dark was actually about the first Christian missionary who tried to give the word of God to Asia, to be more specific, India. That was the first missionary who came to India during the East India Company regime. As we know, East India Company was not interested in the religious spread. That was, after all, traders, or they didn't want to indulge in the cultural things. So missionary activities were a big no-no for them. So the missionaries had to fight not simply the people whom they want to address, in this case maybe the Indians, and along with the Indians, they also had to handle their own British, the soldiers and the government. So when the earliest missionaries were trying to walk into the country from maybe the Bengal coast, they were trying to do it under the garb of the midnight so that they can enter the country in the night and go into safe places. So you watch that, you'll really enjoy. Now, I am coming to one particular topic here. In the birth of the discipline, the earliest anthropologists they were having certain inherent weaknesses. They were, of course, ethnocentric, and most often they did not visit for writing, and of course their perspective was mostly, their writings were mostly from their own perspective. I'm not using any technical jargon here. I repeat what I said. The early anthropologists had certain weaknesses. They hardly visited the field for writing about them. And when they were trying to gather some information from where they were gathering, this is going to be the next discussion for us. And whenever they were trying to write, they wrote from their own perspective. Thirdly, their perspective was reflecting ethnocentrism. Look at your syllabus, chapter 6, paper 1. This should be your heart of preparation. This particular chapter should be your heart of preparation because, see, like every social science has its own theoretical foundations. Like how geography has geographical thought, political science has got its own political thought. Every social science has got its theoretical foundation. Whatever you do in your discipline is based on the theoretical foundations. And the way the syllabus is arranged there, starting from evolutionary school to maybe postmodernism and cultural materialism, etc., the arrangement is chronological. Meaning, we have moved from evolutionary theories to whatever postmodernistic and other theories. So whatever writings had come during those phases reflected that kind of a theoretical background. Are you there, sir? Are you there? You are fine? You are able to understand? Huh? Because I know we are all new souls meeting in the pursuit of something. You know souls? You've seen souls? You've seen? Whose soul? Jiju has seen. Huh? Whose soul you have seen? He says, every night I see. The neighbor's wife's soul, whatever. We are going to talk about souls also, and we will see souls in the class. It's something like this. You have to bear in mind that when the earliest theory comes, all the rest of them are going to come in the future. You don't know what's going to happen in the future. You started with evolution. What is evolution also we don't know right now. We don't know. We started with evolution. And when people gave evolutionary theory of culture, culture is something like, I am giving a very basic and naive kind of a definition here, which is very understandable to a novice person. Culture may be a combination of several things with which you are living. Culture is a combination of several things with which you are living. They may be your belief system, your habits, your ideas, your material aspects, your non-material aspects. Everything that you are possessing forms part of your culture. Are you there? Are you there? Now, this is a very basic definition, because when I say throughout the discipline, when we are going to study culture, one fine day you start wondering what is culture. Right now you understand, culture is nothing but what we possess to live, in the sense that when group of people are living together, they might be having something in common. What is there in common is nothing but culture. See, in yesterday's class I spoke about society. Society is nothing but a group of people sharing a territory and having maybe some kind of a commonality. That commonality is culture. You there? So somewhere you scribble the basic idea of society and culture. Society is a group of people sharing a territory and possessing certain commonalities. Sir, don't really bother about in which direction you are moving. I will take you somewhere. Secondly, culture. It includes a comprehensive interlinking, interdependent elements such as habits, beliefs, traditions, customs, and several material, non-material elements. Several material, non-material elements that are commonly possessed by a group of people. Fine? That are commonly possessed by a group of people. Sir, the definition that I am giving here is primarily communicating the meaning of the term. It is a workable definition so that we can start talking about it liberally in the class. But at a later point of time, we would see how different thinkers have defined. At that point of time, we will bring the name of the thinker. See, he defined it as such. Somebody said, no, no, you are wrong, and some other definition comes. So when evolution was the first theory, when theorists were trying to study culture according to the evolutionary theory, they gave certain ways of understandings. In the process, they must have done some mistakes, and people did not subscribe to the idea of evolution. And the later schools, if you go on seeing in the syllabus, chapter 6, paper 1, there is something called diffusionistic school, there is something called functional school, there might be a structural school, etc. One after the other, different thinkers came up challenging the earlier school and giving their own ways of thinking. I hope you're following what I'm saying. And that's how the discipline was also taking its shape. The reason why I said that theory forms the foundation of your answers, your discipline, is that wherever you go in the subject, you will have to quote the related thinkers. Say, for example, I'll make it much more simple. We have already used Franz Boas. What do you know about him so far? Branches. Okay, he gave branches, huh? Fourfold classification he had given, and go ahead, sir. He spoke about ethics in anthropology, aspect of cultural relativism, और बताइए. Studied about Eskimos, historical particularist. See, you already know 5 statements about him, and you also know that he can dance. I mean, when you write answers to questions like contributions of Franz Boas, these are the things that you are going to elaborate. That's what I said. Within a week of time, even without you knowing that you have learned anthropology, you would have learned a lot of it. And you get surprised that you are already become an anthropologist in a week's time. That's multicultural society. Suppose you have Indian society. Indian society has so many culture groups. So what is happening there? You are trying to live in a multicultural society. And even in a multicultural society like India, all these different culture groups might come up with some kind of a commonality. Some kind of a commonality. Hai na? Even if you belong to different, in this particular particular case, if I am taking faiths, there are so many different faiths in the country, and all those faiths are actually living together. Because of living together, you might come up with, over a period of time, some common understandings. That's what we are struggling to have in UCC. And those commonalities would emerge as Indian culture. So Indian culture doesn't mean that wherever you go you have the common culture there. No, there are some broader commonalities. If you go into the details, you get subculture, Indian subculture. I hope I have you. It's something like society is like a vessel, culture is what you fill in it. Society is a group of people having some commonality, and that commonality is nothing but culture. Okay, may I go ahead? May I go ahead? Now, we are trying to look at how the early anthropologists were trying to study. Most of the earliest anthropologists, or for that matter, earliest culturologists, were the Britons. We know that these were the people who had spread most widest across the country, across the world, in a wild way. And then if we observe, over a period of time, there came an understanding. So initially, administrators were trying to see how surprising these cultures are. They started writing their notings about the cultures. And when these things were getting piled up from across the world, all these things were getting piled up in London. And the government thought that we must systematize these writings. And by that time, the term anthropology was also emerging. And hence, they had come up with the establishment of what we call Royal Anthropological Institute, which is still the most primary organization of anthropology in the world. So Royal Anthropological Institute, or Royal Anthropological Society, what we call, they started with this practice of training people for studying cultures whom they were naming as anthropologists. And then gradually several universities have started coming up who were training people in this particular art. So it was all the British doing. You should thank the British for giving this subject to you in UPS. Of course, UPSC also is the given of. Once this had happened, different stocks of people, different stocks of researchers and anthropologists started using different ways of studying the simple societies. I'm using the word simple societies. When I'm using the word simple, it means that these are the ones that were the earliest, the ones that were having simple ways of living. We live in a complex world, midst of so many complexities, complex ways of interactions between us. But those were considered to be simple societies. Or to be, in a very blunt way, the ones that were studying maybe pre-agricultural tribal societies or pre-civilizational societies. Or, this is much more communicative enough, all these people, the early anthropologists, they were actually instrumental in bringing the dichotomy of we and them. We are largely the Western, them are the non-Western. So anthropology emerged as a discipline consisting of the Western scholars and researcher administrators studying the non-Western societies of either Asia or Africa or Americas. You're there? See, by the time we understand what anthropology studies, we would have ended the course. I repeat what I said. When the British started writing, started studying as anthropologists, there emerged a dichotomy of we and them. We are the Western scholars, administrators, etc. Them are the non-Western societies. They may be tribal non-Western or non-tribal non-Western. Say, for example, if the British scholars were trying to study India, they might be interacting with the mainstream society or with the tribal society. So it is from that sense I said the non-Western is a combination of the tribal and the mainstream. Based on what the thinker, the researcher wanted to study, he could study that. So initial foundations were because of the shock they had witnessed. But later the governments thought that in order to rule them better, or maybe in order to exploit them better, we must know what they are. That's where we say it is a discipline that tries to study the others. That was my very first statement in your class. Now here I would want to bring to you, look at your syllabus, chapter 8, paper 1. That is a chapter dealing with research methodologies. Somebody read out. Thank you. The terms that we are going to pick up now are fieldwork, secondary sources, participant observation. We must have come to hear this, seeing is believing. Many people believe only if they see. For everything they ask for a proof. Seeing is believing. But we also must have heard that blessed are those who did not see yet believe. Everything cannot be visually perceived. Everything cannot be visually perceived. The air, the pain. అదేదో సినిమాలో బ్రహ్మానందం గారు వాటర్ అండ్ నీళ్లు కలుపుతారు చూడండి. I mean milk and water. Once you are mixing milk and water, water loses its identity. Unless otherwise you get some kind of a meter there and try to see what is the purity of milk. But otherwise you cannot distinguish between water and the milk there. Or you cannot even see the pain. You can't show the pain. How many times your friend must have given a call asking for a coffee, you suddenly get a headache. You can't show. But then it is there. This kind of an argument persists here. Initially, anthropologists, they were the people who started to write without visiting the field. They all depended on the list of people I have written there. The administrators, wherever administrators were writing accounts about the tribes and distinct populations, they used to get an access to them. Or maybe Christian missionaries, wherever they were going, they were writing, narrating their experiences. These people used to take from them and they used to start writing books. So the earliest anthropologists, so once again you go to chapter 6. The first one there, evolutionary school. Some names are given there. What names are given? Tyler, Morgan, Phrase. Say outside. Saying is very important so that their spirit comes into you. And that would help in learning the discipline. 3 names are given there: Taylor, Morgan, and Fraser. Very lovely people. Great storytellers. You love stories? Telling or listening? Or reading? Listening. Anybody who is a good storyteller here, I won't ask you. Oh, great, ma'am, please visit our house. My son needs storytellers. I am tired of creating new stories every day. And whenever we give the old story, he says, I have heard it. I would want to have a word about these 3 people. They were the earliest people who wrote about the less known cultures. Meaning I can call them the earliest school of anthropologists, earliest group of anthropologists. Now it is here I am also parallelly using this word field work. If any anthropologist is not visiting his subject, but still writing about them, we call him a writer without a field work. You will have to visit the field in order to know the reality. So anthropology for a long time was a discipline which believed in seeing and believing. But then initially they thought that, because it is a very treacherous journey, you understand. From London, if you have to come all the way, so many days and months you will have to spend on the seas, and then you do not know what you are going to bump into. That is the reason why people used to collect a lot of data from the travelers and missionaries, etc., and then they try to give their ideas about them. But then you will have to understand that these earliest thinkers were really prolific writers. Pick up any book of that age, it runs into hundreds of pages with the smallest font that is possible, and so much of information put in there and written in a story manner. These people who were not personally visiting the field and were trying to write about them, they are called armchair anthropologists. Armchair anthropologists who used secondary sources of data. Feeling sleepy, anybody? Feeling sleepy, anybody? Yeah? Feeling sleepy? We will watch a movie, don't worry. Get used to be with 3 hours without a sleep in the class, sir, please. Whenever you get sleep, you slap yourself, or you ask your neighbor to slap you. He would love to do that, I know. He had been waiting for that opportunity for quite a long time. In the worst case, when you get to sleep, you remember how much you have paid. You'll not sleep for the lifetime. Earliest writers were armchair anthropologists, like how we used to have the grandfather's armchair, no? Aramse. You sleep there and you imagine seeing them. You imagine they living in a particular way, and then you write a story. It were perfect film stories they were trying to write. And when you are not visiting the field, depending on somebody else for the data, we call it secondary source. If you are visiting there firsthand, that's a primary source. Okay? Out of these 3 people, Taylor can be called the founder of anthropology. Taylor can be called the founder of anthropology. He was the one who gave the earliest book of anthropology, which was called Primitive Culture. Because all this is necessary, sir. All this is necessary before we formally take you to different topics. I put it this: religion is a part of culture. Humans indispensably have culture. When I say culture, if you see the kind of defining that we have done, you come up with some ways of living, what is that you worship, how you are getting governed, how you are meeting your economic needs, what kind of a familial system you might be having, what kind of technology you have. Everything is a culture. So generally it is said that humans by default have a culture, or humans alone have a culture. Of course, these are the things that we'll be arguing later. No, it is not simply humans. Chimpanzees also have culture. We'll keep that there for now. But then, if I'm looking that way, a religion forms part of a culture. Your question is maybe the other way around. When you say that it is necessary that religion should have a culture. See, though it is too early in these classes to talk about, because you brought the topic, I should say this. Religion can be seen as two parts. One is the one that is given in your scripture. The second one, that which actually you practice. Religion can be two parts. One that is given in a scripture, scriptural religion, the one that you practice. The two need not necessarily be the same. The scriptural one is something that you always look up to as an ideal thing. But the one that you follow is largely the culture. For example, if you see, for instance, the Arabian populations, how they have their religion, how it operates. The same religion, the Islamic religion, when you see in the other parts of the world, maybe in India, maybe in Indonesia, maybe in China, when you see that they are altogether different in the way they function. Are you following what I'm saying? The basic ideals may be the same. That is a bookish wing of religion. But then what you practice is cultural. I hope when we go into further details, we would further understand. Can I go? You're fine? Yeah, I'm going there. So initially people were resorting to secondary sources. They were not visiting but taking the inputs. Primary source is the anthropologist, by himself, visiting the field in order to write about the culture group. So people moved on from secondary source to the primary source of data collection. Primary source is based on visiting the field. So primary source cannot happen without a field work. You visit the field. So if you are an anthropologist, you by yourself are trying to gather the data. But I'll have to talk a bit more on secondary sources. Taylor, I was saying, was the first anthropologist who was trying to write on cultures. The first book was that. In fact, we will be remembering him at several places, including in the topic of religion. Taylor is known for the kind of definitions that he had given, the terminology that he had given. Because when you are trying to create a discipline, you should give the vocabulary to the reader. You will have to invent the vocabulary. This was a man who was almost inventing the vocabulary. These were all very good storytellers. Out of these three people, one name I will pick up, that is Fraser, James Fraser. See, Fraser was an American anthropologist. And when we go into the theory, we are going to see from what different backgrounds these people are coming. They were because anthropology was not existing at that time. Definitely they must have come from somewhere else. This is also the reason why we welcome every person from different walks of life, different basic backgrounds. You can actually thrive in the discipline. It may not be an overstatement when I say this, that if somebody failed in their own field, they can shine as anthropologists. Yeah? We will be counting on them when we go into the discipline. Whoever has come up with major theories in the early parts of anthropology, we see them that they have failed in their own field and found respite here. Fraser was one such kind. Acha, we must have seen Encyclopedia Britannica, even if we have not flipped the pages. You must have bought it. Encyclopedia Britannica in your school, maybe, when you topped this class or the school, you were gifted by the school management, Encyclopedia Britannica with so many volumes out there, you brought and put it in a shelf so that everybody can see. After a generation, when termites have got all the vocabulary there, we thought, okay. When Encyclopedia Britannica was being produced, the job of doing that was actually taken up by one Briton called William Smith. He was a linguist who later studied geography, later came to anthropology. William Smith. We are going to talk about him in the school called, you can see chapter 6, paper 1, called Diffusionism. William Smith was a diffusionist anthropologist who played a major role in the production of Encyclopedia Britannica. And when Encyclopedia Britannica was being produced, Smith had hired Fraser. Fraser was an American. Fraser was hired by William Smith in order to give information, in order to process information related to Encyclopedia Britannica. When Fraser was going through all those pages, all the kind of diverse data, he got interested in the study of simple societies and becomes an anthropologist. Acha, do you believe in magic? Magic. Magicians, not that magician, yahan se phool nikala, yahan se nikala. Magicians in the sense that one variant is tantric kind of, black, white, brown magic, whatever kind of. Have you seen, do you believe in magic? No? Raise your hands, all of you. Raise your hands. Let me see your hands, all of you, yeah. Both the hands, both the hands, both the hands. No, all of you, yeah, all of you. And those who have some thread here, you leave the hand, rest of you put down. Rest of you put down. The ones that have a thread, put it up. What is that thread for? उतारिए सर, हो गया, देख लिया. What is that thread for? Huh? ये దేవుడు तिरुपति. Good luck. कहाँ से? Who gave? Ma? वो क्या था? కొత్త కనబడుతున్నది మొన్న ఈ మధ్యన పెట్టినట్టు. You give it such a sanctity. You never remove it, hai na? How much ever soiled and dirty it becomes. Did you try to clean it any time? But every time before the exam you kiss. Don't know what goes in. We try to put so many threads around our body at different places. All of them having some kind of sanctity or the other. That is magic. You believe that this has some kind of a power. How many times in your life, so many exams you have written, how many times you have visited some Swami, somebody or the other, kahin taviz mil gaya, kahin dhaga mil gaya, kahin kuch mil gaya, baan liya. We strongly believe that they bring luck. The luck brought him to Hyderabad. We actually do not know what luck is. We do not know who is lucky, who is unlucky. But then we today believe that all of us are lucky because of something you have worn, something you did not wear. Fraser was somebody who wrote on magic. He wrote several books. I'm not trying to showcase here all his books that were much more than 30 in number, each book going into huge volumes. There is one very beautiful set of books James Fraser had written, and that was, don't forget this, dare not. The Golden Bough. The Golden Bough. The Golden Bough was written in 12 different volumes, not one or two. The Golden Bough. The underlying theme of all these books was supernatural. The supernatural may be God, maybe demons, maybe magic. Fraser was a master of magic. See, everybody has got our own dreams. If at all you nurture a dream of becoming a magician, you read Fraser, you'll become one. Because Fraser's book, I told you, these were the people who did not visit the field. They were only writing accounts based on the collection from across the world. Fraser was a great collector because he had access to Encyclopedia Britannica. So whatever books that he had written, he had filled the books with examples from different parts of the world, including India, southern India, Hyderabad, all these regions. You find innumerable accounts of magical practices. Any specific fellow you would want to harm, each of us have. Each of us have somebody in mind who must have hurt you, who must have done something to you, and then you said, kind of, given an opportunity, I shall do it. And maybe that is the reason why you thought you would do the UPSC. One fine day I'll see you, kind of. You need not do UPSC alone to do this. Magic will do that. Because Fraser had demonstrated many times, Fraser demonstrated in his writings many times that these practices do work. They do work, believe me, they do work. We will see in our later classes how magic works and how magic doesn't work. We will be talking about them. And now, by the time these people were filling the pages with so many stories without seeing, all of them moving towards ethnocentric writings, that was when Boaz emerged. Boaz was the first person who had thoroughly supported primary source of data collection. He was a person who supported primary source of data collection. He told the discipline how to do a research in the field. Though the earlier writers, some of the earlier writers visited the field, but they did not do a comprehensive study. But comprehensively how to visit a field and what you should do in the field, how you will have to write, everything was provided. All the guidelines of fieldwork were presented by Boaz. You're there, sir? So tomorrow, literally tomorrow, you can walk into the field to do a research. Visiting the field is very, very important, sir. But as we go into the discipline, we are going to see how the field was changing. Whether visit is possible in every occasion. Whether visit is possible in every occasion. In what occasions you cannot visit? You want to study some society, some culture. In what occasions you cannot visit? Can you tell me? Political constraints are there, war is there, you may not. Yeah, and? Okay, security threats. What's the name? What's the name? What's the name? Ma? Sentinelese is fine. Who was he? Who was he? Chow. In this particular case, hostile conditions out there, you may not venture. And one is the enemy. This is another kind of an enemy, cultural enemy. This is the political enemy, that is a cultural enemy. And inaccessible. Like how we were talking about in yesterday's class. The man ended up in Afghanistan. The place that he says was not visited by a foreigner for over 37 years. So inaccessibility and environmental constraints. Maybe if you are from a very hot tropical region, you want to study Eskimo, and the thought itself would freeze you down. And what else? Hostility and finances. You don't have money, okay, fine. That's where Indian universities are struggling. Our anthropologists are mostly doing their fieldwork in libraries. And I'm looking for one particular answer from you. What are the cultures? In what circumstances you cannot visit them? Extinct cultures. If some culture is not existing anymore, you can't travel back in time in a time machine, get all the data and come back. If that is the case, not really possible, you will have to do something else. So we will see that also will come in the discipline. Every time primary data collection may not be possible, but it is preferable, it is advisable. Even when you are going into primary source of data collection, I am only stopping there. There is a tertiary kind of a data collection, a quaternary kind of a data collection, but I am not taking you there. I am only limiting here for now. In the primary sources of data collection, once you are going there, how will you get the data? That's what is written in chapter 8, Techniques of Data Collection. So many varieties are given: schedules, questionnaires, interviews, life histories, oral histories, participatory methods. Here is participatory method. Participant observation. That was actually the point I wanted to drive you to today. You're all fine, sir? You're all good? Enjoying? You have to enjoy. Whether you understand or not, that's a different story. If you enjoy, understanding automatically comes. How many people understand our family members? We don't understand. As long as you enjoy the company of them, it means that you are understanding them. Acha, any particular cultural practice, maybe a procession or any kind of an event like a marriage or any kind of an institution that you really got inquisitive about and you spent time trying to observe them. That may be a practice, a procession, or any kind of, maybe a worshipping practice, a marital practice, or anything of that kind, or an eating practice, or cooking practice, anything of that kind, which you were really inquisitive about and you had observed in your life, something that comes to your mind. You got married to Banyan? No, okay. Somebody getting married and you watched it? Achha, okay. You were there watching? You were there watching? No, you heard of it, yeah. You read about it. Okay. She was getting married to a banyan tree because the husband was also going to be such a tall fellow. And Arvatai. Any weird kind of a practice which you thought weird, for them it may not be, but for you It was interesting. Nature worship in such as, there are many ways of nature worship. Any specific kind that you can think of? Correct, Nana, for rain. Frog marriages. I also did that in the childhood. We used to go house to house collecting money. We always wanted to be on the boys' side, groom's side, so that you get a dowry. Frogs also get dowry. Male frog gets a dowry. That's one kind of a practice. Look at that. I was not simply observing, I was participating. I was participating, not as a frog, but at least. Some of us, I'm sorry if I hurt any of you by saying this, have a very interesting way of food consumption. If we observe ourselves, how we eat, etc., many times we eat in a manner without thinking much about what the neighbor is thinking. The noise that we make, the extent of body we use in eating. Some of us do not use the body at all. We may use, kanta churi kind of a thing, and we eat. The very typical, Britain ways of eating. Or some of us may use the fingers. Some of us may use the entire palm and do this. Those of you who moved south very recently, I'm sure you must have started experiencing this. We have a lot of sambar in our sambarda. And we use not simply this, we do that. Right from the elbow to the tip of the middle finger. The challenge we give is that we won't let a single drop of sambar to spill. Kind of. Some of us have tea with such a noise. It looks like there is a tsunami in the cup. The moment you gulp in the sip of tea there, so much of noise you make, as if the entire globe's oceans would enter your body. Many times you must have left your cup because of the noise. I'll just be back, you finish your tea. Because of the kind of hospitality that you'll have to give to your friend, and you cannot tolerate the noise. So you go there, and then you wait for the noise to subside, and finally you come out. But here what you should be doing is, why not indulge in a participant observation? Why not you try to see why people do what they do? Why people do what they do? They might be getting some kind of a fun there. They are enjoying it. Why not you also try and see why this way? Or maybe some of us have this flair for fighting on the roads. With a slightest brush between the vehicles, very slight kiss out there. There's so many vehicles, naturally you try to love each other. And whenever there's a love, it leaves a line there, a slender proof of the affection. And you'd stop your vehicle, use all your vocabulary, use all your body language, and try to communicate to the neighbor your anguish and affection towards him. When this happens, as an onlooker, I always enjoyed these things. Because I always loved street fights. There were occasions when I used to get down from my bus whenever something was happening as a school goer, as a college goer. I used to get down and watch the whole thing. Okay. When everything was over, then I go home. There were also a couple of occasions when the fight was so very huge that they ended up going to a police station. I also know they can get kind of. That was a favorite pastime for me, observing people fighting, kind of. And I also love neighboring wife and husband fighting. I was going, yeah. It's only that because of decency, I don't go and do the keyhole thing. But otherwise, all of us have these instincts. This is what anthropology is all about. Anthropology is actually tries to use a particular lens in order to peep into the lives of the people. We are the people who peep into the lives of the people and try to write our stories from there. Earliest writers were not participant observers. They were secondary source observers. And the second category was primary source observers. Boas always supported, always called for a primary source of data collection. He says, no belief without seeing. So you go there, see, only then you write. He said it is better to go for a participant observation, but then he was not a participant observer, but his students became participant observers. Look at your syllabus, chapter 6, paper 1. There is something called functionalism. There is one name whom we are going to worship in our life for the next few years, months. As long as you get into service. Use his photo. Worship him. Malinowski. He's a male. Because whenever it ends in I, Indians have a problem, whether it's a female or male. E, no? Should be for a female, but there it is for the male, Malinowski. He is going to tell us so many tales. He was a participant observer. Without getting into Malinowski's story, because those stories would take hours of our discussion. Those we will be doing in some other class. But right now, let me say this. Before I say something, write your next question in the list, number 4. Merits and demerits of participant observation. Merits and demerits of participant observation. Merits and demerits of participant observation. I'll only give a brief idea. See, we call for participant observation because we would want to know firsthand what they feel, why they do what they do. You must have seen people practicing Matam in Muharram processions. A lot of blood simply flows with that fragrance, typical fragrance. The weak-hearted people, we don't advise them to go there. But then for the strong-hearted people, we prescribe, you participate. Because many times you question, why is it that they do this? You can understand only if you participate. Zanjeer le lo, you'll understand. When the blood flows. Next time, when you have Muharram procession, try going there. If not as a participant observer, as a non-participant observer, try understanding what's going on around. The problem occurs when we are living in multi-religious society. We are always inherently critical about the other faiths, the practices of the other faiths. So I think when we start participating in their weird practices, we try to understand, we get an understanding of why they do what they do. I'm not saying that if some society has a sati practice, you also burn your wife. No. Of course you would want to, so that you get a new one. Always new wife looks beautiful. But then participant observation can be of different varieties. I would start with Malinowski in a couple of statements there. When Malinowski was using participant observation, he was very clearly having an idea that, see, I'm doing this for my academic interest. I'm doing this for my academic interest. And hence he was very aloof from the field. We will talk about this later. But then there can be an anthropologist who may be swallowed by the culture group. Because of participant observation, you might go very close to the field and may be absorbed by the field. Unless otherwise, at one point of time, wisdom dawns on you and you realize, okay, I have to go back, leave them and come back. It is from that perspective I would want to
Hello, this tragic story comes from the heart of the Amazon rainforest in Brazil. We've got a special report on the Yanomami Indians, a people living a Stone Age life, in danger of being wiped out by men armed with guns who've come looking for gold. For tens of thousands of years, the Yanomami have lived a simple life, surviving on what they could hunt or pick from the trees. Everything they needed could be found easily in the rainforest around them. The forest is a bit like an enormous supermarket, except here, everything's free. But the Yanomami have been careful not to take more than they need, and they don't harm the rainforest. They believe that if they did, the Amazon and its animals would take their revenge. Until recently, there's always been plenty of everything here. The Yanomami only had to work for 4 hours a day to gather what they needed to survive. The rest of the time was for talking, telling stories, and enjoying a simple and peaceful life. The enormous round huts where the Yanomami live are 10 meters high and completely built by hand. They're called maloccas, and each one is home for about 20 families. Every family has its own space around the edge of the malocca to hang hammocks and keep a fire burning day and night. It's their sitting room, bedroom and kitchen all in one. There are no walls or curtains to separate this family from the next. And in a way, the people of the village are just one big family. Each Yanomami hut stands in a rainforest clearing several days' walk from the nearest neighbors. It's surrounded by gardens where the Indians grow the fruit and vegetables that make up most of their food. They plant over 60 different crops, and we wouldn't recognize many of them. But over half of the gardens are used to grow something more familiar: bananas. The gardening and everything else here is done by hand, as it always has been. Until very recently, the Yanomami didn't even have metal knives or iron cooking pots. They came with the first explorers. Before that, their only tools were made of stone. The Yanomami still have no machines. That doesn't just mean CD players or food mixers. They don't even have the simplest machine of all, the wheel. There are no books or school here, because there's no such thing as writing. This baby will learn all she needs to know about surviving life in the rainforest from her mother and other adults in the village. The rainforest's hot, and the Yanomami wear few clothes. Instead of getting dressed when they get up in the morning, they decorate their faces and bodies with paints made from rainforest plants. The big stick this boy's eating is much tastier than it looks. It's raw cane, the nearest thing Yanomami children have to sweets, and the same plant that we make sugar from. For thousands of years, Yanomami children like these grew up in their rainforest home facing few real dangers. Then, 5 years ago, all that changed. Their safety ended when outsiders discovered the vast riches of their rainforest. The Yanomami would still be safe today if it wasn't for this, gold. A tiny amount like this is worth 25 pounds. Miners can come out of the jungle with bags full. It's the promise of riches like that that have brought them here in their thousands, and it's killing the Yanomami. As they search for their fortune, the miners break up the soft Amazon earth with powerful jets of water, scarring the forest forever. A year ago, there were 5 times more gold diggers than Indians in the Yanomami homeland, and miners hunting with guns killed so many animals that many of the Yanomami began to go hungry. To separate the precious gold from the mud in their pans, the miners use mercury, a deadly metal that's poisoning the rivers. Downstream, there used to be much more fish than the Yanomami could ever want. Because the rivers are poisoned now, the fish are dying, and another source of food has gone for many Yanomami. Now, when they go fishing, they often catch nothing at all. And the Yanomami have to use the same polluted water for washing and drinking. Until the miners came, the rivers had been unspoiled and pure. These Yanomami are fairly healthy, but many others are ill or dying from diseases the miners have brought into the jungle. The sickest are brought here to this Indian hospital. There are other tribes here as well as the Yanomami. Most of them are sick from illnesses their people had never known before. It's reckoned that in the last 2 years, 1 in 5 Yanomami has died. Most of the victims were children, and some villages were almost
Actually, that comes in 4 or 5 parts. You can actually watch it back home and write a proper note. This particular tribe forms a great example for a topic. You can see chapter 3, paper 1. In chapter 3, paper 1, the last topic there, globalization and indigenous economic systems. Globalization, indigenous economic systems. That is actually the topic where we can liberally use this thing. The one that actually spells the reality of what the mainstream had been doing. I mean, this discussion will be there, a comprehensive kind of a discussion from where the problem actually started when we begin with tribal problems. Right now, you can bear in mind that as the economic systems were evolving, different populations across the world were evolving at different speeds. Not everybody was evolving in the same speed. Somebody was already reaching an industrialization age, somebody was still living at a hunter-gatherer level. See, at one point of time, it is believed, people might question the belief. It is believed in the discipline that the earth was providing for every population because man was living with limited needs. When the needs started to become wants and greeds, the greedier populations, or maybe the more populous populations, were taking a big chunk of the resources, depriving the smaller, maybe less evolved ones with regarding the resources. And this is what is the glaring example of that. And that's where gradually we'll come to your question that you were asking, whether it is welfare or development kind of. Right now, we would just have a look at this. I hope you can see. First you take the picture, then we will talk about it. Savages, barbarism, civilization, magic, religion, science, Chinese, Aztecs, Tahitians, and Native Americans. At the highest level are modern Europeans. I repeat, if at all you can't make out the words magic, religion, science, modern Europe, Chinese, Aztecs, Tahitians, and Native Americans, savages, barbarism, civilization, arrested cultures, all those on the right hand side below the modern Europeans are the arrested cultures. Modern Europeans live in the civilizational age with the science. Two different things are put together in that picture. On this left slanted side of the triangle, what I have mentioned there, magic, religion, science, savages, barbarism, civilization. Can I talk, sir? So because we have started writing down things and we started coming to classes, slowly things will settle down in the mind. Your confusions, your fears would start settling down, and you'll slowly start getting acclimatized to the discipline, to the way we do things in the class. At this point, I'll have to tell you, this might look to be very weird, but then I actually want to say this, that you are in the field of this competition for the exam of UPSC. The one thing that you shall have is an absolute selfishness. That might look to be very weird when I say that. That is a personal trait you must possess as long as you are appearing at this exam. Don't be philanthropic. Don't think that, okay, fine, I will write the whole notes and then I will give to you, you study and get through the exam, I will watch you giving interviews. Be extremely selfish. That's very important in this field. I said something there. Coming here to this picture. So this is the kind of, on the right hand side, Chinese, Aztec, Tahitian, those are the populations, or North Americans. Those are the populations arranged in that hierarchical order. Who is arranging? The European anthropologists. And the kind of terminologies you see here, savages, barbarism, civilization, these are also the terms assigned by European early anthropologists to certain populations. See, the way you name the people, naming, the terminology, the vocabulary, that indicates what you think about them. If you are calling somebody a savage, savage is something like an abuse. But you are using this word to certain people. The barbarians, the second one there, the barbarians and savages, these are the people other than the civilized European people. The ones that are placed below the civilizational level. The European thinkers, they believed that they are at the highest level of evolution. And the rest of the people are below them. Savages are the people who live on food collection. They are the people who are living based on hunting, gathering, and food collection. Okay? And after that level comes the food production level. But then that is the early food production level. That is something like a primitive agricultural population. So barbarism is nothing but a primitive agricultural society. Okay. civilizations or modern agriculture coming with several other things of technology. Now the early Europeans, what they believed, early European writers, what they believed was that they are at the highest level of evolution. Because of certain special characteristics they possessed, they could evolve fast and then they could reach there. On the other hand, the rest of the people, whether the American Indians or maybe the Aztecs, Tahitians or whatever, they are there at those levels based on to what extent they could evolve. They are slowly evolving. The Europeans, they are actually somebody like a lamp post for them. The rest of the communities would be looking at the lamp post and taking that particular way in order to reach there. Are you following what I'm saying? All this was the earliest way of writing in anthropology. These terms, savagery, barbarism, civilization, and this kind of a hierarchical arrangement was first given by Tyler himself. Tyler used these terms to begin with. So he was trying to arrange human cultures in these layers. They believed that Europeans have reached the highest level of cultural evolution. Rest of them are gradually making strides. And one fine day, they will also reach there. And this is where we see at every place there is a comparison, there is an ethnocentrism. That's what was called for by people like Boas or Malinowski. You can compare, but comparison every time should not be to say you are superior and I am inferior. Comparison is to recognize the difference. The discipline, Hanji sir. How to categorize savagery and barbarism? The categorization is based on the level of evolution, or I'll put it this way. But that was going to be the next topic, but then, see, if I take up economic subsistence, you move from food collection economies to food production economies. In food collection, you have hunter-gatherers or fishing communities of the earliest times. As you are moving forth, you get maybe pastoral populations, and then you have primitive agriculture, whom we call horticulture, primitive horticulture. Then you have intensive agriculture. Then you have industrial societies. All these we call food production. This is a via media, and these are food collectors. Okay, so the terminology is a combination of economic level of evolution and coterminous with several other levels of evolution. When I go to Taylor, I will pick up various things. What was the familial practice at that time? What was the marital practice at that time? What was the religion at that time? So he was trying to bring all those characteristics related to one another, but the primary categorization was based on economic subsistence. So these were the people who were at the very basic level of economic the technological evolution, etc. So they were largely food collectors who were in the process becoming food producers. We generally pick up economic subsistence because economic subsistence is one. Economic subsistence is nothing but how you are getting food. What is your source of food and how you are getting food. Whether you are plucking it from the nature or you are processing it. These are all processing people. These are all processing people. Pastoralists, they have animals, herds, etc. They might produce certain things with the animals, from the animals. So, and these are intensified productions. But when it comes here, you are directly taking from the nature and consuming. These are the food collectors. So, at the end of the day, the food collection, food, how you are getting the food and how you are consuming the food, that forms the basis of knowing at what cultural level you are. Are you there? Are you there? I repeat. The question was that on what basis he was categorizing them into savagery, barbarism, etc. He says that I am arranging them in the process of cultural evolution. When he says cultural evolution, he is actually arranging them, taking into account various aspects of culture, including economics, political aspects, marital aspects, familial aspects, religious aspects. All those he is trying to identify. They are at the very primitive level. And then as you are moving into the later levels, each of them was getting evolved. This is one major example we generally take. But then I will give you another which you might relish. And you would say, yes, we understood. When Taylor was trying to write this story of savagery to barbarism to civilization, I pick up the marital practice. Savages are those who practice promiscuous sex, and then they move towards group marriages. From there might come polygamy. Then by the time you come here, monogamy. He is giving three broad stages, but then other thinkers come, they try to fill it, give the sub-stages and all that. But for the example I am taking this, promiscuous marriages, relations to group marriage, to polygamy, to monogamy. So at the earliest level of culture, at the earliest stage of culture, there were not many rules about the marriage or sex, and it was promiscuous sex that was being practiced. And then there might have come a group marriage, because see this, if I am giving pictorially. Sir, in the discipline we have certain symbols. We use the symbol triangle for male, for female. We use this symbol for marriage. It's an equality symbol. Marriage. This we use for what I love, divorce. And vertical line for children, horizontal line for siblings, and this for death. Dead male. After marriage he'll die. These are the basic ones. Children, offspring. This is siblings. These are the basic symbols. We'll get some more later. So, in a promiscuous sex, this is a society, say Australian Aborigines. Australian Aborigines were known for promiscuous relationships, and Australian Aborigines were studied by. Look at your syllabus, chapter 6, paper 1, look for this name. You have something called structural functionalism. Radcliffe Brown. I am trying to answer his question. The question was on what basis the categorization happened, savagery, barbarism, civilization. Categorization or arrangement in the hierarchy was based on how different things were evolving. We are taking one example, that is how marital relations have evolved, must have evolved. Taylor says that initially there was promiscuous relationships existing, and the promiscuous relations were actually proved to be right by R.C. Brown's field study. R.C. Brown visits Australian Aborigines, writes a thesis there. So these are all the males and females. In a promiscuous situation, there is no definite way. I am randomly putting. Even this may be. No, kind of. Could be possible. Community takes. Community takes. See, I'll tell you, don't get me wrong, sir, because early in the course I'm saying these things which are very private. మీ పేరమ్మా నిన్న చెప్పారు మర్చిపోయానా వినీత Don't you think marriage makes you selfish? My wife only to myself, my husband only to myself. I don't share with anybody else. You own your partner. From the other side, one loses freedom of looking at others, talking to others, being with others by getting into marriage. Your opportunities are actually curtailed, limited to an individual alone if it is a monogamous marriage. But in this case, people are very broad-minded. You see? People are very broad-minded. There is nothing like whose children, tera baap kaun, there's nothing like that. If a child is born, it is the child of the community. And the child grows with the help of the rest of the people. Mother is actually somebody who is established, because from mother the child is born. That bond cannot be challenged. But when it comes to who fathered, the question doesn't arise at all. Okay? Biological understanding of the childbirth may not also be there. Biological understanding may not also be there. And it is seen as a natural phenomenon. And it is accepted to be like this. But then, over a period of time, it must have so happened that, okay, this looks so very chaotic. Let us, out of the whole community, maybe some males came up, some females came up. Okay, let us have a relationship between us. Instead of having such a chaotic one, we would say, okay, some females and some males, anybody could have a relationship with anybody, but numbers are limited there. A bunch here, a bunch there. This over a period of time must have emerged as one fellow out here must have become very, very powerful. So in polygamy, there are two varieties again. One we call polygyny, the other we call polyandry. Polygyny and polyandry. Suppose one of them became so very powerful, he says, okay, I am the powerful fellow, I should have all of you. Similarly, one from here must have emerged as powerful or whatever. That is polyandry. But gradually there must have come an enlightenment with civilization and all that stuff. Or maybe numbers are also becoming a problematic thing. Then they thought, okay, let us have one for one, at least on a legal lines. So the arrangement from savagery to civilization, one of the bases is this also. At this level, he seems to be not having the kind of civilizational understanding. He is there at a very basic level, next only to maybe some kind of a non-human individual. Next only to a non-human individual. So there are no rules of behavior, no controls there. But by the time you come here, there are so many controlling mechanisms established. There is only one opportunity. It's a lifetime opportunity. That is the reason why you see him having his last smile on the dais of marriage. That is the final smile that he'll have. And that is the reason why you take so many pictures, because you'll never get to smile so much later. And you digitalize your smile after that. After that particular moment when you smile, people are looking at you inquisitively. Why are you smiling? Is everything okay? Am I clear to you, sir? Yeah, thank you. But of course, you can choose any for yourself. You can choose any for yourself. You know, some cultures are here in polyandry, some are there polygyny, some are there at monogamy, and some are still here at promiscuity. So, I was talking about genesis of anthropology, where the early Europeans were trying to study the less known, the distant, geographically and culturally distant populations of the world. And early anthropologists were trying to arrange them in a particular sequence. And the European thinkers believed that it is the white man's burden to change the state of what we call the non-Western populations. The Europeans believed that it is the burden they are now carrying to civilize the non-Western populations. So in the name of when we say development, we are trying to show that, see, the white man thought that you fellows, you're still there. You have to come up. I will take the responsibility of uplifting you. In the process, they were trying to do several things. They were colonizing. Through colonizing, they were trying to civilize them. They were trying to Christianize them. They were trying to give them the tools of what is called civilization. What is civilization? What is civilization? When we say a particular community, a society is at the civilizational level, that I heard. I didn't respond, meaning that I'm not agreeing with you. और बताइए. Adhering to? Forget about the European, non-European, and all that. If any particular population, if you have to say that it has reached, Hanji ma'am, that's very dangerous, sir. That's very dangerous. We never have freedom, sir. Freedom has its own cost. Meaning that there's no absolute freedom. Don't aspire for an absolute freedom, sir. She will also ask, what will you do? When you are asking, will you give? Okay, ठीक है, चल. कल मिलेंगे. हाँ. और बताइए sir, और बताइए. Think something else. और. And one characteristic that distinguishes civilization from the rest of the things, rest of the groups. Something much closer to education is script. Having a script is the basic characteristic of civilization. The script comes because of so many things. Once you start having a script, you have reached a civilization. So now you can actually look at all those cultures whom we have named as civilizations and were studying in history. In all these, the so-called civilization, one commonality we find. Of course, there are technological things, urban things, cities are there, temples are there, all that is fine. But one major commonality which is looked up to by the researchers, archaeologists, is script. Writing. They have reached such a stage in their evolution that some people emerge who had no job. They thought, okay, I will start doing something. And then all those shapes took the form of a script, and it emerged as a language. There are so many terms we are going to come across. Like, we have something called a speech and a language. What we are speaking about here is script. Civilizations have script. And what is the difference between speech and a language? Yesterday we were speaking of Jane Goodall and her relationship with the chimpanzees. She had learned to talk to them. She learned their speech. Humans have a language. They have a speech. Speech is any kind of a communication, structured, unstructured, whatever. When we come to language, language has a grammar. We have rules to follow in the language. Every word has a specific meaning. Your sentence has to be arranged in a proper way. You talk in terms of tenses, tomorrow, day after tomorrow, past, and all that. And we presume that chimpanzees don't talk in tenses. They might be, we don't know. Now, one other thing you should understand is, as anthropologists and as maybe humans, we are always ethno-humans, or we are anthropocentric people. We are all anthropocentric people. We always think that humans are at the highest level. Among the humans also we have all these categorizations, and Europeans believed that it is their responsibility to help the others in evolving. When all this was going on, there are two terms that I would want to talk about now. Whenever you get time, you keep glancing through the question papers. You may not understand a bit from there, but then you keep glancing through what must have been asked, written, etc. When the Europeans started visiting the places, because Boas said we should visit, so everybody was packing bags, going to the field. But logistics were also an issue based on where your guide is sending, how much funds you are able to get. Based on that, you are trying to go to places to study. Once you go there, once you start gathering data, how you gather data, that's not my concern now. Once you have started to gather data and start to writing down things, start to understand various things that are going on. In the initial days of the discipline, the thinkers were writing from the observer's perspective. You're following what I'm saying? Once they start going there, initially they were busy in their Armchairs, sleeping, dreaming, and writing. Whatever dream comes, they used to attribute it to some society, and they were writing the stories. Those stories were mostly ethnological. We used this word in the last class, ethnological. Ethnology is writing about a culture group, mostly comparative, and what is the other trait? Ethnocentric. So earliest writings were ethnological in spirit. Boas says you should go, so these people started visiting. So primary source of data collection started. Once you go there, majorly, I am considering here non-participant observation. You are observing things and various methods you are using, maybe interviews, maybe something else, but then you are trying to gather information, forming an opinion. Most of the time, in the beginning, these writers were using their own perspective in writing about the other people. And this kind of writing method, we call it etic. Etic is generating ethnographs from observers' perspective. Generating ethnographs from observers' perspective. Generating ethnographs from observers' perspective. The second one is emic. E-M-I-C, emic. Emic is ethnograph written from the insider or the subject's perspective. Subject is whom you are studying. The insider or subject's perspective. Suppose you are studying Yanomamo, if you are writing something, from their perspective, it is insider's perspective. So initially, observer's perspective was there. You will have to understand something here, sir. When I am saying etic and emic, we are talking about it now in the 21st century. But Boas did not use these terms. He was only talking about them. Later thinkers, they gave these terms to describe this. Okay? But then you can freely use while writing in the exam. You don't say that he has given these terms, but then he was using this kind of a comparison and then says observer's perspective is having some kind of a lacunae. What we should look for is to incorporate insider's perspective. Now
he married early in his career a Yanomamo woman from the village of Hasubuateri, the village I first took him to.
Not every anthropologist can be expected to stay 12 years down there among the group. They, they have lives. They want to live their culture. But nevertheless, you cannot discard the fact that when you get to know a people well, that the similarities far outweigh the differences. But at first contact, you see it just the opposite. What happened to me ultimately was I didn't want to leave. I came here out of default. I didn't want to leave the Yanomami. I wanted to stay there.
Em 86, eles desembarcaram no aeroporto de Kennedy, aqui em Nova York. Arima nunca tinha pisado num chão que não fosse de terra batida. Nunca tinha visto um carro, um prédio, um poste de luz, um telefone. Ela, que veio de uma tribo de 200 pessoas, perguntou ao marido: "A sua tribo é maior que a minha?"
Yarima thought she was coming down to another rainforest, my forest. But again, the wonders of the flexibility of the human mind, she adapted here very, very well. And she had no problem with our material existence. She had problem with that aspect that attracted me down there. And that was that feeling of interpersonal relationship, that community. And said, she used to say, they live in a box. They live inside, all enclosed. And they look at television. When she wakes up, she sees the whole village, all the people, the leaders, the shamans, the relatives, the loved ones, and the nieces and nephews, and it's all there. And there's her life right before her. We wake up, she thought it was the saddest, most depressing thing that a man and his wife would go take their children and live enclosed all alone. It's not the way. That's why she said when she left, that's not the way humans are meant to live, not one more day. And I understood her, but I kind of got, you know, caught up in things here with the kids and the job and all that.
His name is that, good fellow. Meaning you can name your child bad fellow also. That is the anthropologist who went for participant observation in Yanomamo tribe. When he went there, he had fallen in love with a lady. He gets married, lives there for about 12 years, that's what is the narration says. He was almost there living with them, but after that he realizes that yes, his work is somewhere else, and he gets back to the mainland, mainstream America. But when he goes initially, he takes the wife, the Yanomamo wife, and goes with the children. In fact, you know, much later, a few years ago, one of these little fellows in the video, he has released one documentary. He himself, at a later part of time, the child of this good fellow, becomes an anthropologist himself. But before that, she stays with the husband and children in the mainstream society for some time. She cannot carry on for a long time, so she says, I go. So she leaves to live with the fellow Yanomamis. After about 20+ years, when the small fellow grows up, he actually wanted to know, this is a very typical film story there. He wanted to know why the mother actually left them. So no, it was still an inaccessible area wherein he had to go up and down several mountains, waterfalls and all that. Finally, you know, he goes. I mean, all this is there in another documentary you can watch and enjoy. And once he goes there, he understands why she actually didn't want to stay in the mainstream society, because she altogether comes from a different world. And later he stays back. And now he is running an NGO there, working for various kind of issues, especially the health issues among the Yanomamis. Because what we see in Yanomami today, as the earlier movie shows, that people started to hunt the region, I mean plow the region for getting to that, you know, precious metal. When all that industrialization, mining started coming up, people getting into various kinds of, you know, diseases, etc., some kind of an assistance from the mainstream is becoming an imperative, because they did not choose that kind of a disease to come. They did not choose. I hope I have given you a good one there. This is another level of participant observation. Many times this happens. You go there in order to study them. Apart from studying, you indulge in a relationship, you get married. That is the reason why whenever you go to the field work, carry your wife with you. Not simply for anthropological study, but generally also, you should always see to it that your partner is in the vicinity, nearby, at an arm's distance, so that whenever you are drifting away, she's pulling you back. Very, very important, sir. Because we always tread on a slippery ground. You can slip anytime. See, such a vital truth of life I gave. Come back here. Ethic and emic. Ethic is nothing but writing from an observer's Hanji sir. We are coming to that. Most of the time, whenever a cultural practice we observe, we first form an opinion. And based on that, you try to generate your ethnographs. A very simple reference I can give here. There are a good lot of things from the field studies. It is mostly common these days for the couple to indulge in a verbal spat, it's more common, more frequent. Previously also it must have been there, but because joint families were there, you didn't get much of an opportunity to talk to each other. Whenever you got that small amount of time, you were mostly affectionate towards each other. That's what one should understand. When the resource is scarce, you try to conserve it. You try to use it to the maximum extent. But when you are there in a nuclear family, available to each other 24 hours of the day, you don't know what to do. For everything you are indulging in a fight. But keeping aside the situations, when you see the two people indulging in such kind of occasionally violent interaction also, she is much more powerful these days. So when you see this kind of a thing happening, when you are writing from an external perspective, you might have an altogether different picture. But when you want to write the situation, narrate the situation from their perspective, why is it that such kind of a relationship is coming up, such kind of a hostility coming up between them? You may be in one case writing from your side. When I narrated all this joint family, nuclear family and all that, I might be writing from my perspective. But when you ask them, they have their own reason why they are doing this. They have their own reason why they are doing this. I take it a little forth from here. Suppose we see n number of tribal and government fights going on. The tribal community says, I won't leave this ground. I have been living here for centuries. I own this. I am not going to get out. Whereas from the government's perspective, if you see government says, I would want to build a dam, I'll give you water, I'll give you electricity and everything, you empty this region, I will change the whole thing and give it back to you. Or I will show you some other place where you can live in a luxury. There is electricity out there, there are buildings out there, there are vehicles, you can stay there, I am offering you development, why don't you come? Are you following what I am saying? So a government's perspective there is an observer's perspective. But if somebody has to come to go into the details of that tribal community, why is it that they are resenting the governmental programs? Are you there, sir? I'll give you one example. I am introducing the very first name in Indian anthropology. You're not tired, right? You're not tired, right? Yeah, good. LP Vidyarthi. One of the very strong foundations of Indian anthropology, to be more specific, tribal anthropology. LP Vidyarthi. There is one book that he has written, there's 30 of them, but one of them is that has become very popular, especially among the students of UPSC, namely Tribal Cultures of India. Tribal Cultures of India. Written in 1960s. Even now it is revered. Because the kind of original writing, primary source writing. This man, when he was writing in 1950s, I should also say this here, Vidyarthi was a very close associate of Nehru. So if somebody was given on a very important task in those days, now naturally it has to be understood that you are in the close circle of the Prime Minister. So Prime Minister was assigning him one job. The job was to inquire a case of a community called Maler, or the other name of Maler is Sauriya Paharias. Sir, actually this is that study which directly is linked to one of the topics in your syllabus, paper 2, chapter 3, there is something called nature-man-spirit complex. Towards the end of chapter 3, paper 2, nature-man-spirit complex. I'll bring you there. So the problem at that time was, this is actually in the Rajmahal region, the Bihar, the old United Bihar territory, the hub of all mining activity. So government was planning mining and industrial activity in that zone. Though a promise had come from the Prime Minister, Mahler wouldn't listen. The Prime Minister was such a handsome man. He had that acumen to impress anybody literally, but then failed at Mahler. There were many violent interactions between the government forces and the Mahler. So the job was assigned to LP Vidyarthi to bring the information. Why is it that the Mahler was not ready to accept the government's rehabilitation program? Remember, at that time we did not have any resettlement and rehabilitation policy. The policy had come only in 2006, 2007 rather. Resettlement and rehabilitation policy. If time permits, back home you try to go to this. I mean, it is incorporated in your tribal anthropology book. Resettlement and rehabilitation policy. Now, I'm talking about something much before that. He comes up with a displacement and rehabilitation drive. Vidyarthi had conducted a study among the Mahler. Actually, this is not a scheduled talk. I have to impress him. I mean, he should be happy with the answer, right? Heard of this, sir? Heard of this? Doctor, no? You're a doctor? No. Had it sometime? Mahua? That flour with which fermented wine you make? Ipasara antar. Occasionally consumed by the tribes because it gives them the nutritious diet. Mahler were known for Mahua cultivation. Apart from several other things, they have shifting cultivation also. They have shifting cultivation, they have Mahua cultivation, and several other things. So Vidyarthi goes and produces an ethnograph, tries to incorporate as many emic perspectives as possible. Sir, I am giving a very important statement there. He was trying to get the information from them, and he was asking several people, and different people were coming up with different opinions. Why are you not agreeing with the government's idea of displacement and rehabilitation? People were coming up with these ideas. They were having Mahua cultivation, they had shifting cultivation, they had several other things, and so they were actually brewing their own liquor. They were into shifting cultivation. By then, Forest Conservation Act had come into force, and the act declared shifting cultivation to be illegal. And they were living in a forest region. The belief is that the forest is the place where the gods stay. And every other kind of living is linked to the forest and the gods who stay there. Now the problem is, when inquiry was made, some people said that we wouldn't abandon our gods. You should not abandon your God, otherwise he will abandon you. We cannot leave our gods in the forest and come. And maybe the government was saying, take them along. They were not used to any other kind of living. If at all the displacement and rehabilitation happen, the place where the rehabilitation happen should give them equal kind of situation, the same kind of living there. But generally it doesn't happen. Some of the Malars were afraid that maybe, we are practicing shifting cultivation and hence they are shifting us. We will not be able to carry on the shifting cultivation in the new place, and our livelihood will be gone. Our mahua will be gone. Our own liquor will not be there. We will be forced to consume what is given in the excise department, which is more intoxicating and which is more costlier. You're following what I'm saying? There are opinions coming up from inside. Government was thinking that maybe these people were resenting only because of shifting cultivation. Government thought that people were thinking that shifting cultivation will be not allowed in the new place and their economics will be affected. So government was saying, we will give you land, you can till. But that land may be a small patch. In the shifting cultivation, we had the entire forest with us. We could divide it into pieces, and each piece we could harvest at a time and go on to the other one. Parallelly, the rest of the forest was taking care of our regular necessities. But now you say that I am giving you this patch, you cultivate it, and there is no natural water facility, you will have to go for irrigation, and irrigated agriculture is not known to them. And government was thinking that maybe because of this reason of shifting cultivation, they were not ready for rehabilitation. But then Vidyarthi says, this is not the only reason. People are afraid of so many other things. They are afraid of the mainstream populations. The problem with most of the tribal communities is they are afraid of the mainstream population, where the culture is very much different from their own culture. The shockingly different culture because of which they are resenting. It is not an overstatement, sir. Even with us, if suddenly somebody comes up and says, leave this area, live somewhere else, we are doing something here, I don't think we would readily agree. Why do we think that so many metro projects across the country are lying pending? The land acquisition thing is not happening because people are not ready. For generations we have been living on those cocooned roads. We are not ready to vacate. Unless otherwise some strong-headed, strong-fisted administrator comes up and nothing doing, I take this land, only then things happen. And above all, where you are asking them to abandon their gods. My God. Just imagine, one fine day, your temple, government, maybe if the government comes up and says, under this we have some kind of a treasure, we will have to empty this, we will have to shift the god to some other place. I always dream of this day, one fine day when Defense Department comes up and says to Lord Balaji, sir, these 7 hills are very strategic for us. We are going to build a armed army establishment here. You will have to be vacated. So we will offer you some other place. You can go there. We will have our military occupying the 7 hills. What will Balaji do? Or what will you do? Will you agree? It's only a temple, right? I will give you another 7 hills, much more greener than that, much more picturesque than that. What's the problem? It's only a temple, right? So what? That's where I said, our beliefs are beliefs, their beliefs are superstitions. When you cannot move an inch of your God's place, why about Lord Balaji? Hyderabad is known for several smaller worshipping places suddenly coming up in the middle of the road. Yesterday it will not be there, today it will come, or some green flag comes. And that small vermilion struck stone, you start worshipping, and a small cement platform you make, and the platform goes on widening, and the road, it would cover it as a divider there, an island, traffic island. And now at one point of time you feel the traffic congestion, you would want to move it, you can never move it. Touch the flag and show. You'll touch heavens. Forget about the 7 hills out there. This is what is insider's perspective. And also, because I will have to conclude on that. Sir, what this man showed from the Mahler study is that there can be different opinions inside. You may not have one single emic kind of an opinion. There can be multitude of emic opinions. Why I am saying there is, just because you belong to the same culture, everything in your culture need not be similar. Everything in your culture need not be similar. Every individual has got his own different perspective. That's what we say. In anthropology, we try to understand the others. The other may be your own immediate neighbor, your own family member. Though you belong to the same culture, your opinions may be different, your perspectives may be different, and the discipline tries to tell you to be patient in understanding the other's perspective. Are you there? Did I give you? We will begin with the topic rather in tomorrow's class, but I will give you an idea. What we should be doing is defining tribe and talking about how economic categorization of them happens. So for that, I want you to go through that, Ministry of Tribal Affairs, the various things that you should be looking at. To begin with, towards the bottom of that page, you find that. Tribes India. When you enter there, so many documents and all that comes up. There is one dedicated to videos collection. You need not have to do all of them. Be choosy, pick up 1, 2. And remember, all this is produced from government's perspective. So truly it is an ethic perspective in which everything is written. In many of the videos and document, government definitely boasts of about the monies it has been spending, about the schemes it has been implementing. For the sake of the exam, for the sake of giving government's perspective, that becomes important. We will have ample other write-ups to counter the government's perspective. Remember, we are not here to counter the perspective of the government. We should also see what has really happened before all this was coming up. Whatever we are doing in the form of developmental schemes or all those kind of measures, what we are trying to do here is either damage control, or maybe we are trying to correct some of the mistakes that we have done earlier. I would want to close the whole discussion with one man called B.D. Sharma. The man who authored a very, very popular book in anthropology called Sir, in some of the places while we talk in the class, you might find the discussion to be rather anti-governmental. But then whatever we speak will be within the boundaries of the Constitution. Even if some criticism is made, that will be in the interest of some disadvantaged groups. When the Constitution is talking about the protection of certain disadvantaged groups, we will try to give our voice from that perspective alone. So do not be afraid. I'm not going to create some kind of anti-governmental elements here. This man, B.D. Sharma, a former civil servant who had written that book, Dalits Betrayed, I would actually want to conclude on that very interesting statement he made. Most of us know this. The dam with the name Pong. Pong Dam? Pong Dam, you know? Go home and see in your atlas which river or which distributaries, which trades are involved, when the project came into completion and what were the issues. The foundation stone of Pong Dam was laid by the first Prime Minister. B.D. Sharma, through interview method, gave some opinions from the tribals there. Sir, it looks so very painful, especially when I'm starting your course with tribal anthropology. It looks to be very painful experience, because we will be trying to relish the problems of the others, and looks to be a very disappointing situation. What are the kind of discipline we chose, kind of? But then that is the reality, rather. See, when we talk about, when in the future classes, when we talk about displacement, rehabilitation, etc., we will be referring to good number of projects where displacement had happened and resultant effects there. Pong is a special case because the people here are displaced multiple times. Even in the very recent displacement rehabilitation policy, we did not incorporate the case of multiple displacements. How exactly you are going to rehabilitate people who are getting displaced again and again? One displacement may be tolerable, but what if the thing repeats again and again? So now here B.D. Sharma writes, and I quote, the Pong Dam ousties made this remark that the first Prime Minister promised them light, as in electricity, promised them light, and after several decades they still are living in the darkness, and everybody at a far distance are living with the lights that are produced because of the displacement of them. So we are not against any kind of development, but then the development has to be just. It should be, I mean, whoever is getting displaced, they should get a just share in whatever benefit that is being got. ठीक है? How are you? Go back, see what you have done in the class. Take out your planner. We are at class 3. We are largely looking at a combination of 1 and 2. The topic, emergence of anthropology, and research methods. Meaning of ethic endemic, thirdly, ethnograph of Yanomamo tribe. Sir, from now onwards, you start writing ethnographic profiles. So go home, certain points that I have mentioned in the last class, you try to arrange them, so that you will be ready with the kind of stuff as we are going forth, the 2025 videos, I mean, will be ready. The source will be 1, the class note, 2, the video. And from now, you are looking at tribal anthropology, the booklet, Tribal Anthropology. For today, I want you to go through in the book of Tribal Anthropology, give a broad reading, start giving a broad reading of this topic called forest policies. In the book of Tribal Anthropology, forest policies. It will take some time for you to read. By the time I come to forest policies, you would have finished. So that's where I am. Those of you who haven't picked up your material may contact the office. We will try to assist you.